Hi, everyone. I'm Paul, and I'm here with Morgan. We're from the Symphonic Laboratory, and we're here to talk about how you can play music in a way that brings people to a higher level of reality. We experience reality every day in a mundane fashion, and music, as we know, has the possibility of bringing you to another level. What we want to show you is the practical steps that are used by some of the world's top musicians to get you there. And by top musicians, I don't mean the 1%. I mean the 1% of the 1%. So if you figure there are 100 million musicians in the world, that works out to about 10,000 people in the world use this method. These are the top professionals, and that's where we've learned this method from. I learned it from Leonard Bernstein and Celi Badaki, and I've been working the last few decades actually refining it, teaching it to people at conservatory level, some of whom have gone on to principal positions in major orchestras. So we know it works. And I just wanted to give you a glimpse of it because with the Symphonic Laboratory, you'll be able to learn how to do this. All right, let's get to it.
Okay.
Okay, again, it's not a performance, it's not an audition. What were you thinking about? We talked about alignment. So obviously you're making sounds. That means you're already at the stage where you know about the motion and the functions. So can you tell us a bit about what you learned is in the score? What is it actually asking us to do beyond the notes and rhythms?
There's a growing in this musical line on a macro level from the C on the downbeat of the first measure.
All right, can I just play that on the piano so people can hear what you're talking
Please.
about?
And
That's the
that's
C,
C.
okay?
And then skipping a measure to the D flat. And then the next measure, the energy of the phrase decreases a little bit by going back to C. And then there's a climax of the phrase in measure 7 with that dotted quarter note, full forte, E flat.
You're talking about this.
Yes.
Okay, so you've described what's in the score in terms of an overarching line. Now, there are notes in between. They're important, and we could talk about their function too, but we're starting with the line. That's great. It sounded like you did actually align it that way. In other words, I heard that your sound increased in energy from the opening, and then the next little figure was more. Right. So I heard that. I heard that it came away after that, resolving to A flat before that high E flat. Now this phrase is a little weird actually because you have that cadence on the tonic, right? That sounds, if you don't know this piece, you're hearing it for the first time, that sounds like the end of a nice classical phrase, right? Then, of course, Beethoven being Beethoven, he doesn't let it go there, right? You'd want maybe some second phrase that develops that idea. No, you just get this weird thing. Everything stops, right? It's a whole bar of nothing happening, a loud note. No musical energy, right? It's dying away, if anything. Loud, but there's no rhythm keeping it going forward, is what I mean. There's no propelling. So it's funny to me that you talk about that as the climax of the phrase because I think that's definitely true, but it's on like a larger level of that opening phrase and then what comes after that, which is that, and then we hear that in this in the strings and then in the winds. That idea is played out. So you're already onto like a group of phrases where in which that has a new life of its own in a way.
What you're saying, it's reminding me how when we've played something over and over again, we've become so accustomed to how it will go that sometimes we play it with that anticipation. And I think the point Beethoven might have been thinking in putting a forte there, it's the second written dynamic of the whole piece, is he wants us to think that the phrase is over on that A flat. And so then we should play it that way.
Right. I mean, it's, we're starting in A flat major. And then we get to the end of that phrase is. He doesn't write crescendo, so you got to try to make it as surprising as possible, but within the character of the piece, you don't want it to be like a subito sforzando. He didn't mark that. It's just F, just louder. Okay, so let's listen again. I think remember, I've got to remind myself, the purpose of why we're here is not to super analyze and go deep on all the counterpoint harmony, etc. It's to focus on what you're doing, like the score plus the sound. How are they aligned? So let's start with just the first two bars, and we'll stop there, and then let's talk about it.
That time I think I grew too much for that opening C. That was too much.
Okay, so when you say too much, that may be true, but how do we know it's too much?
I suppose in relation to the D flat, if both the C and the D flat are the same dynamic, same volume. When I say dynamic, I mean a gradation within the dynamic of piano.
I see. Let's call that the dynamic zone of piano.
Dynamic zone, I like that.
I think musicians tend to get fixated on whether it's P or double P or F or whatever, and those are not absolute loudness levels. If Beethoven just writes P for all the instruments in this whole passage, that doesn't mean every note is exactly the same loudness. They're all P loud. It's in the zone of piano in which there are variations of loudness.
Good elucidation. There's not as powerful an emotive effect, I think, if the C is the same loudness as the D flat, because there's no motion, no growth.
Exactly. So,
it's static.
Right. So what you're saying is the motion from C to D, the linear motion, is increasing. It's increasing energy. Pitch is going up, the harmony's getting more dissonant. A lot of reasons. Downbeat. And therefore, your sound needs to also have more energy in it. It's not enough to put it all on the back of the poor harmony and the counterpoint to carry the energy. So your sound is going to have some energy, no matter what you do, by definition. Sound has some energy. The only question for you is the energy of your sound going to be aligned with the motion that Beethoven is asking us to do, or is it going to contradict it in some way or go against it? Our hypothesis, our theory about why this method works is that by aligning the sound with the motion, it's much, much easier for a listener's brain, for your brain, to instantly understand what's going on. Much the same way, like if you draw a bunch of dots on a piece of paper, if they're in a line, if they're aligned, your brain instantly sees a line instead of a bunch of dots. You almost can't help it. We want listeners to not have to think and work and say, oh, I think I hear the melody, or I know this is increasing, but I have to kind of ignore the fact that the musicians are getting softer. None of that should happen. It should be like the line emerging from the dots on the page. You don't think about it. So in this case, it's a line, and it goes from C up to D flat. So all you have to do is make the D flat louder, which you did. So it was aligned, but you said too much. I thought that was interesting. It's almost like you're getting to the B part of the MFAB process right here, which is fine. Like, there's no set order in which you have to do these things, but I just think it's hard to do. It's hard to know whether it actually was too loud or not because we don't know what came next. And we don't know, we meaning the people listening to you over this device, don't know really how the energy of the sound was in your room. We have to take a second to recognize that all the judgments we're going to make about you or anybody who plays on our videos are to be taken with a grain of salt because none of us are there in the room with you to hear the actual proportions of these sounds. So let's go ahead from the beginning and go a little further and see if you can actually play the whole phrase again.
Okay.
Because you have a great idea for what the motion is in the score. I don't think we need to sort of discuss that. Let's just assume it's a valid understanding, and let's just focus on your satisfaction with how you've aligned your sound with that understanding. Okay?
That felt pretty good.
Yeah. What would you change about it? What advice would you give yourself?
Well, this is something else we talked about before that I was becoming cognizant as I was playing it. How it's easy to crescendo consistently. It's more difficult to decrescendo consistently. And so I found from the D flat in measure 3 to A flat in the middle of measure 6. As I was playing it, I wasn't sure, and being sure is a good thing, I suppose, that the decrease in energy was consistent and linear.
You know what I said at the beginning about how this method is used by some of the greatest musicians in the world, and it's how they get the results that they get, and how you're going to have to walk before you can run. I think what we're seeing is the walking. You've got the right idea. By running, that should feel just like, the baby who's learning to walk doesn't think about it after they learn how to do it. They don't have to think like leg, leg, leg. I mean, who knows what babies are really thinking too, but like if you're learning to ride a bike, you're trying to say, how do I stay balanced? It's very wobbly. I think we're at sort of that phase. Like, what's the right thing to do. It's just that you're thinking about it. Like, am I getting softer enough? Am I keeping the ending alive enough? And it's fine to be in that phase. I just want to call it out because it's exciting to get to the next step, and I just want to describe it, which is where it becomes more second nature. And then you really just play music, and it's totally awesome. So, if you play this phrase 1,000 times, thinking about those things at first and then getting them under your belt, then that state emerges. So don't be discouraged. Actually, I shouldn't even say don't be discouraged because we don't want to set the stage here as, oh my God, don't make mistakes. Oh my God, I can't do it. Oh my God, oh my God. Oh my God, anything. Because that's where you learn. When you're unable to do it, when you feel uncomfortable, you don't learn much if you're totally satisfied and it's like, that was awesome. And let's just wrap it up at that because the purpose of this video was really to just give you a glimpse of how we're thinking, understanding more than what's just written in the score in terms of notes and rhythms, and then seeing how we can align our sound to that musical energy and motion. And I think we saw a bit of that. So for next week, we hope to have a guest, and that guest could be one of you. If you are listening and you're interested in trying out a passage you're working on, or you have some questions about, I just don't know how this phrase should go, or how do you know how a phrase should go? A lot of us are like, I don't know how you figured out. Why don't I just copy what I hear? That's fine. Like, that's part of learning is you copy. But you got to get beyond that or you'll be just the same, and that's not so great. So contact us at info@symphoniclaboratory.com. Email us and say, I got a passage I'd like to try out. Or you could even just send us the video of you playing it, and then we could talk about that. Another option is you could post your video to Instagram and DM us at Symphonic Laboratory on Instagram. Uh, or put a hashtag in your video, on your video, next to your video. Face the music.
Hashtag face the music.
Yeah. Until then, happy practicing and goodbye.
Thanks for watching.
Bye. Thank you, Morgan.